The first thing Emma Grant noticed that morning was the sound of rain, soft, rhythmic, like fingers tapping gently on the bedroom window. Daniel's arm was draped across her waist, heavy and familiar, his breathing even against the back of her neck. She lay still for a moment, listening. The house was quiet except for the rain and the faint hum of the coffee machine on its timer downstairs. For a fleeting second, she thought about how peaceful it all felt. Ordinary, safe. She turned to face him. Daniel's eyes opened slowly, his expression lazy and warm. "Morning," he murmured, voice thick with sleep. "Morning," she replied, smiling. "You're going to be late again," he grinned. "Then you'll just have to write me a doctor's note." They shared a small laugh, the kind that belonged to couples who'd been married long enough to know the rhythm of each other's mornings. Emma rose, wrapped in a pale robe, and padded to the kitchen. The smell of roasted coffee beans and rain-soaked earth filled the air. The kettle whistled. She poured, stirred, and glanced through the window. The sky hung low and gray over Maple Drive, water pooling along the curb. Across the street, Mrs. Darby's curtains twitched, always watching, always gossiping. Emma smirked softly. Daniel entered, adjusting his tie, hair still damp from the shower. He kissed her cheek. "Same meeting downtown?" she asked. He nodded, taking his travel mug. "Shouldn't be late tonight, promise." She wanted to believe him. His promises always sounded genuine, until they didn't. As he grabbed his briefcase, the television flickered to life on the counter. The local news anchor's voice filled the kitchen. "Authorities continue searching for 29-year-old Mara Linton, missing since Thursday evening. Police say foul play has not been ruled out." Emma froze mid-sip. A photograph appeared on the screen. A smiling woman with auburn hair, bright eyes. Something about her face felt vaguely familiar. Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts. "That's awful," he said quietly, gaze fixed on the screen for a beat too long. Then, just as quickly, he looked away. "People disappear every day. It's tragic." He kissed Emma once more and stepped out into the drizzle. The front door closed softly behind him. Emma lingered by the window, watching his car pull away. The rain had stopped, but the world outside still felt damp, unsettled, like the air before a storm. She didn't know why, but a small, inexplicable chill ran down her spine. Tomorrow, she would remember this moment and wonder why she hadn't listened to it. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still wore its heavy gray like regret. Emma moved through the kitchen, cleaning the counter where Daniel's coffee ring had dried into a faint brown circle. The television played softly in the background. Another update on the missing woman. Mara Linton, 30 years old, last seen leaving the Silverwood construction office late Thursday evening. Emma froze, sponge in hand. Silverwood Construction. Daniel's company? She turned up the volume. Mara's photo filled the screen again. The same smile, the same auburn hair that had unsettled her yesterday. The reporter continued. Co-workers describe her as diligent and kind. Police have questioned several employees. Her stomach tightened. When Daniel came downstairs, freshly shaven and humming faintly, she asked, "Do you know her?" He paused just slightly, just enough. "Mara? Yeah, she works in accounting." "Or did. Everyone's talking about it. Sad thing." He forced a small smile, the kind people use when they don't want to be questioned further. Emma nodded, watching him as he poured his coffee. His movements were steady, deliberate. Too deliberate? "You didn't talk to her much, right?" Daniel chuckled, sipping his coffee. "Emma, she's one of 30 people in that office. Don't start spinning stories." She wanted to laugh with him, to brush it off like he did. But something in his tone, not anger but sharpness, made her look away. By afternoon, she tried to distract herself with chores. The doorbell interrupted her rhythm, sharp and unexpected. When she opened the door, 2 detectives stood beneath the porch awning. Raincoats darkened from drizzle. "Mrs. Grant?" the taller one asked, flashing a badge. "Detective Reed, this is Detective Collins. We're conducting follow-ups on the Mara Linton disappearance. May we come in?" Emma hesitated, her hand gripping the doorframe. "My husband's not home," she said softly. "That's fine," Reed replied. "We'd just like to ask a few questions." They stepped inside, their presence altering the temperature of the house. Collins's eyes scanned the room with quiet precision. "Did Mrs. Linton ever visit your home?" Reed asked. "No," Emma answered quickly. I don't think so. Did your husband ever mention her outside of work? She swallowed. Just that she worked in accounting. The detectives exchanged a look. Reed's tone softened. We understand this can be unsettling. We're just trying to get a sense of her relationships. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. Moments later, he walked in, surprise flickering in his eyes as he saw them. Officers, he greeted calmly. Something I can help with? Reed offered a polite nod. Routine questions, Mr. Grant. Of course, Daniel replied smoothly. But as he extended his hand, Emma noticed the faint tremor in his fingers, and for the first time she saw fear flash behind his practiced smile. After they left, Daniel turned to her, jaw tight. Next time, don't invite police in without calling me first, he said quietly. Emma stood frozen, unsure whether it was anger or worry in his voice. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off, a storm she could feel building. That evening, the storm finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows in relentless sheets, drumming on the roof like an accusation. Emma sat in the living room, staring at Daniel's briefcase beside the couch. He'd dropped it there when he came home, muttering something about exhaustion and heading straight to the shower. She shouldn't have cared. She told herself she trusted him, yet the image of his trembling hand from earlier, that flicker of fear when the detectives appeared, wouldn't leave her mind. The thunder cracked outside, and in that sound something inside her broke too. She knelt beside the briefcase, hands shaking as she unlatched it. Inside lay the usual clutter, contracts, pens, receipts, and beneath them a small black phone. Her breath caught. She didn't recognize it. For a long moment she just stared, the screen lighting up with a soft vibration. One new message. She swiped it open. Please, Daniel. Just talk to me. I can't live like this. Emma's heart lurched. Another message appeared almost instantly. You said you'd leave her. You promised. The room spun. The storm outside grew louder, the thunder echoing her pulse. She scrolled. Dozens of messages, full of longing and desperation, the kind that came from someone who loved and hated in equal measure. The shower turned off. Panic surged through her veins. She dropped the phone back into the briefcase just as Daniel's footsteps approached. He appeared in the doorway, towel slung over his shoulder, smiling faintly. You look pale. Everything okay? Emma's throat was dry. Daniel, who's Mara to you? The pause was slight but enough. Then he laughed softly, shaking his head. Emma, not this again. She worked with me, that's it. You really think I'd do something like that, after everything we've built? She tried to speak, but he stepped closer, voice lowering, almost tender. You're letting the news get into your head, he murmured. You've always been sensitive. You can't believe every story on TV. His tone was gentle, but the words slid beneath her skin like needles. He reached out, brushing her cheek with his thumb. I need you to trust me, okay? Emma nodded slowly, though her chest felt hollow. Later, after he'd gone to bed, she sat in the dark living room. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, heavy and watchful. The phone still sat where she'd found it. She picked it up once more, scrolling through the words that burned her eyes. Then, with trembling hands, she deleted them all. She told herself it was an act of love, a way to save what they had. But as the screen went black, she caught her reflection in it, eyes red, mouth trembling. And for the first time, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. Morning light filtered weakly through the kitchen blinds, gray and thin. The storm had passed, leaving behind a damp stillness that clung to the air like residue. Emma moved mechanically, cleaning the counters, sweeping the floor, her mind replaying the night before in fragments. The hidden phone, the messages, the way Daniel's voice had turned soft, almost pitying. She wanted to erase the memory, just like she'd erased Mara's words. When she crouched to throw away a damp rag beneath the sink, her hand brushed something sticky on the cabinet's underside. She frowned, pulling the door wider. There, faint streaks of dark red smeared along the wood, dried and flaking. At first she thought it was rust. Then she smelled it, metallic, sharp blood. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She grabbed a paper towel, dabbing the surface. It smeared darker, fresher than it should have been. Her gaze shifted to the magnetic strip where the kitchen knives hung neatly on the wall. One was missing, The long one with the wooden handle. Emma stumbled backward, nearly dropping the towel. The house suddenly felt foreign, the air too still. "Emma?" Daniel's voice made her flinch. He stood at the doorway, jacket in hand, watching her. "What are you doing?" he asked. She pointed a trembling finger toward the sink. "There's blood, Daniel. Under here. And one of the knives." His expression hardened instantly. "You're imagining things again." "I'm not. Look for yourself." He walked over, glanced under the sink for half a second, then straightened, jaw tight. "It's probably old wine or meat juice. You always jump to the worst conclusions." "That's blood," she whispered. Daniel's tone snapped. "You've been on edge for days, Emma. First the detectives, now this. You're letting fear control you." Tears burned her eyes. "Then tell me why the knife's missing." He exhaled sharply, turning away. "Maybe I left it at the grill last weekend. I don't know." "Stop acting like some paranoid." He caught himself mid-sentence, forcing his voice calm again. "Listen, I love you. But you need to stop looking for problems that aren't there." His words coiled around her like smoke, soothing, suffocating. After he left, the silence pressed in heavy. Emma sank to the floor, staring at the cabinet. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the silver faucet, pale, hollow-eyed. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Slowly, she opened the voice recorder app. The red light blinked to life. If he wouldn't tell her the truth, she would catch it. She pressed the phone flat against the underside of the table, hidden from view, and whispered to the empty kitchen. "Let's see who's paranoid now." Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees like whispers against the glass. The house had never felt so quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum sounded distant, wary, as if it too were listening. Emma sat alone at the kitchen table, the faint glow of her phone casting a pale light over her face. The screen showed dozens of recordings, each a time-stamped fragment of her life over the past week. Her thumb hovered over the first one. She hesitated, heart thudding. Then she pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the silence, calm, controlled. The kind of voice that once made her feel safe. "You shouldn't talk to them without me, Emma. People twist things. You get confused." She swallowed hard, hands trembling. His tone wasn't angry. It was measured, deliberate. Another recording. "I only want what's best for us. You make things harder when you don't listen." The words seeped into her skin, cold and familiar. He'd said versions of them before, in fights, in whispers, in moments meant to sound like love. But hearing them like this, stripped of context, she could finally hear what they were. Warnings. She clicked another. This one recorded the night she'd asked about the missing knife. "You're losing your grip, Emma. Do you want people to think you're crazy?" Then silence, and a faint, chilling sound, the scrape of metal against wood. Her breath caught. She replayed it, pressing the phone to her ear. The sound was unmistakable, a blade being set down. The air in the kitchen grew tight. The shadows stretched long, the corners of the room pulsing with darkness. Emma pressed her palm to her chest, trying to slow her heartbeat. She whispered to herself, "It's real. It's all real." That night she sat in the living room with the lights off, listening again, each word peeling away another layer of the man she thought she knew. The charm in Daniel's voice was gone now. Beneath it she heard the menace, the ownership, the quiet certainty of someone who believed he could never be caught. When the last recording ended, she scrolled to her contacts and hesitated over one name, Detective Reed. Her fingers shook as she typed. "Emma Grant, I have something you need to hear. Please don't tell anyone I reached out." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. Detective Reed understood. "Can you meet tomorrow morning?" She exhaled shakily. "Yes," she whispered, though no one was there to hear it. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping against the window like fingers asking to be let in. Emma turned off the light and sat in the dark, clutching her phone to her chest. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked. Slow, deliberate steps. Daniel's voice drifted faintly down the hallway. "Em, you still awake?" She closed her eyes, forcing her voice steady. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." Her thumb slid across the screen, saving the file under a new name. "In case something happens." Morning arrived cold and hollow, the kind of gray that seeps into the walls. Emma sat across from Detective Reed in a small cafe off Main Street. The place smelled of burnt coffee and rain-soaked coats. the chatter of strangers muffled beneath the weight of what she carried in her purse. The recordings, now copied onto a flash drive. Reed's expression was unreadable as he stirred his drink. "You said you wanted to know everything," he began quietly. "I need you to be sure about that." Emma's hands twisted around the edge of her mug. "Just tell me." He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photos. Mara's face smiling in one, pale and lifeless in another. Emma's breath hitched. Beneath them lay medical records, and at the bottom a document marked confidential. Reed spoke softly, as if lowering his voice could dull the blade. "Mara Linton was 2 months pregnant when she disappeared. DNA confirms Daniel Grant as the father." The world tilted. The clinking of dishes, the hiss of the espresso machine, everything sounded far away, underwater. Emma's chest constricted. The air tasted metallic. "No," she whispered. "You're wrong. Daniel, he said—" "He lied," Reed said gently. "And from what you've shown me, he's capable of a lot worse than lying." Emma stared at the photos again, her vision blurring. She thought of the phone, the messages, the blood under the sink. All the fragments she'd forced herself not to connect now aligned into a single, monstrous shape. Reed leaned forward. "Mrs. Grant, listen to me. We're close to getting a warrant, but you need to get somewhere safe. Don't go home tonight." She nodded automatically, but her mind wasn't there. It was at her kitchen table, where Daniel had smiled across candlelight and said, "You're imagining things." It was in the way he kissed her forehead every night before bed. Gentle, rehearsed, final. "I just need to talk to him," she said suddenly. Reed frowned. "That's not a good idea." "He won't hurt me," she whispered half to herself. "He loves me." Reed's gaze softened with pity. Love doesn't look like what he's done. But Emma barely heard him. She stood, clutching her purse. "I'll be careful," she promised, though her voice trembled. Outside, the rain had returned, a thin, steady drizzle that blurred the streetlights into bleeding halos. She walked through it without an umbrella, her reflection following her in every puddle, a woman unraveling step by step. When she reached her car, she opened her phone. Daniel's contact photo smiled back, the same warmth that once made her feel safe. She pressed call. It rang twice before he answered, voice smooth and familiar. "Hey, Em, everything okay?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She ended the call. The silence that followed felt like the point of no return. By the time Emma arrived home, the drizzle had turned to mist. The house loomed quiet, its windows glowing faintly against the fog. Inside, everything was still, too still. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening for the sound of him. Nothing, just the clock ticking, marking each second like a countdown. Her fingers moved automatically as she began to cook. The knife rhythmically struck the cutting board. Carrots, onions, garlic, precise, deliberate. The smell of roasted herbs filled the kitchen, masking the sharpness of her fear. She set the table for two. Candles, wine, the linen napkins they'd received as a wedding gift. Every detail perfect, every gesture an imitation of normalcy. When Daniel came home, his tie loosened, his face drawn from the day, he paused at the sight of it all. "You cooked?" he asked, his smile small but real. "What's the occasion?" Emma turned from the stove, her face calm. "No occasion," she said. "Just us." He kissed her cheek, lingering a moment longer than usual. The scent of his cologne, warm cedar, familiar, made her stomach twist. They sat across from each other, the candlelight flickering between them, turning shadows into ghosts on the walls. The silence stretched. Forks scraped softly against plates. "You talked to the detectives again," she said finally. Daniel's hand froze mid-motion. "They reached out to me," he said, eyes lifting to meet hers. "Routine stuff. They said you knew Mara well," he sighed, setting his fork down. "Emma, not tonight, please." Her voice was gentle, too gentle. "You lied to me. About her. About everything." Daniel leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You've been recording me, haven't you?" he said quietly, her breath caught. "How?" He smiled faintly, without warmth. "You're not as subtle as you think. I found the recorder." The room seemed to contract around her, the walls inching closer. The air thickened with tension. "Then why are you still here?" she whispered. He looked up, eyes wet, face contorted with exhaustion and something darker. "Because I didn't kill her, Emma. I loved her. But it wasn't supposed to happen like that. The words fell heavy between them. The candle flickered, sputtered. She told me she was pregnant, he continued, voice shaking. She wanted to tell her husband, ruin everything. I just wanted time to figure things out. We argued near the site by the river. She slipped. I tried to save her, but... He broke off, covering his face with his hands. God, I didn't mean to, Emma stared at him. The man she'd built her life around looked small now. Broken, or pretending to be. You expect me to believe that? She said softly. He lifted his head, eyes red. It was an accident, Em, I swear on everything. Tears blurred her vision. For a fleeting moment, she almost believed him. Almost, because the guilt in his voice sounded human. Real. And that made it even more dangerous. He reached for her hand. She let him, feeling the warmth of his palm, the same hand that might have pushed another woman to her death. Please, he whispered. Don't give up on me. She pulled her hand away slowly, her voice barely a breath. You already made sure of that. The candles burned lower. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed in the distance, thin and distant, like a warning carried by the wind. Emma stared at the empty plate before her heart a steady drum of grief and fury. The truth sat between them now, raw, bleeding, and neither could look away. The morning after their dinner felt unreal, too bright, too quiet. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the faint imprint Daniel's head had left on the pillow. He was already gone, off to work as if last night's confession had been nothing more than an unpleasant dream. But the words kept echoing. It was an accident. I swear on everything, she wanted to believe him. God help her, a part of her still did. At 10:17 a.m., her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she knew before she answered who it would be. Mrs. Grant, this is Detective Reed, said the voice on the other end. We need you to come down to the site. It's about your husband. Her grip tightened around the phone. What happened? There was a pause. We've found something. The drive to Silverwood Construction felt endless. When she arrived, the site was sealed with yellow tape, police cars lining the muddy path. Reporters clustered near the fence, their cameras flashing like lightning against the gray sky. Reed met her near the entrance. His face told her everything before he spoke. They found her, didn't they? She whispered. He nodded. Buried near the north clearing. The remains match Mara Linton's description. We're waiting on final confirmation, but... His voice trailed off. Emma's knees weakened. The world tilted, colors draining into gray. He said it was an accident, she murmured. Reed's jaw tightened. Emma, there's no way to make this an accident. She was wrapped in tarp, buried deliberately. She turned toward the excavation area. The cold wind carried the faint metallic smell of soil and decay. Officers moved methodically, their voices hushed. It looked like a scene from someone else's nightmare, yet it belonged to her. When Daniel arrived, escorted between two uniformed officers, Emma's breath caught. His face was calm, almost serene. No pleading, no fear. Just that same composed mask he wore when he lied. Daniel Grant, one of the detectives announced, you are under arrest for the murder of Mara Linton. Daniel looked at Emma as they cuffed him. His voice was soft, almost tender. You made me do it, he said. Her stomach lurched. What did you say? He smiled faintly, eyes steady on hers. If you'd trusted me, she'd still be alive. The officers pulled him toward the patrol car, his shoes sinking slightly in the wet ground. Cameras flashed. Emma stood frozen, watching him disappear behind the open door, that cold smile lingering in her mind like an imprint on glass. Detective Reed approached, speaking gently. You did the right thing, Emma, but she wasn't sure what right meant anymore. She only knew that as the door slammed and the car pulled away, a hollow quiet filled her chest. Not relief, not justice, just absence. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain again. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. The house had never felt this quiet. Every tick of the clock, every creak in the floorboards echoed louder now that Daniel was gone. Emma had spent months convincing herself she was safe again, that the monster was behind bars, that she could sleep without the dread of waking to his shadow at the door. But healing never came easily. It was January when the first letter arrived. The handwriting stopped her cold. Elegant, familiar, looping like the way he used to sign birthday cards. Emma. Just her name. No return address. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. My dearest wife, you've always misunderstood me. I did what I had to do. You pushed and things broke. You always were too curious for your own good. You think I'm caged, but I still see you. I always will. Emma dropped the page like it had burned her fingers. She tore it in half, then in half again. But that didn't stop the words from living in her mind. Over the next few weeks, more came. At first one a week, then two. Each one more twisted, more desperate. You told them lies. You betrayed us. You belong to me, Emma. We'll be together again soon. Detective Reed told her to forward everything to the department. He's looking for control, he'd said gently. Don't give it to him. But control had already been stolen. The letters arrived at random hours, slid under the door, tucked between the morning paper, left on her porch steps despite the locked gate. Each night, she double-checked the windows, the locks, the shadows. She'd wake to strange noises, a soft thud in the hallway, a car idling too long outside, and then came the one that broke her. Inside the envelope, no words. Just a photograph, Emma asleep in her bed, taken from the doorway. The room in the picture was her room. Same sheets, same lamp, same faint crack in the window pane. The timestamp in the corner read 2 nights ago. Her pulse roared in her ears. She stumbled back, clutching the image to her chest as if it could protect her. No, she whispered, shaking. He's in prison. He can't. But the evidence said otherwise. Detective Reed's face went pale when she showed him. These letters aren't coming from inside, he said quietly. Someone's helping him, or someone else is out there watching you. That night, Emma locked every door, drew every curtain. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone stood outside, just beyond the glass, smiling. The wind carried a faint sound, a rustling, like paper sliding under a door. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Tomorrow she would find another letter, and this time it wouldn't be signed your husband, it would be signed we. The courtroom smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Too clean, too bright for the kind of truth that lived here. Emma sat at the witness stand, palms damp against the polished wood. The murmurs of reporters faded as the bailiff called the room to order. Daniel sat at the defense table in a navy suit, hair neatly combed, posture immaculate. He looked like the man she once loved, not the man who buried another woman. That was his gift, always appearing harmless, always looking like the victim. The prosecutor's voice was steady. Mrs. Grant, can you tell the court when you first began to fear your husband? Emma swallowed hard. The night I found the blood under the sink, she said, her voice trembling. He told me I was imagining things, that I needed help, but I wasn't imagining it. I was seeing him. Daniel's head tilted slightly, eyes never leaving her. They were calm, too calm. Mrs. Grant, the prosecutor continued, you mentioned secret recordings? Yes, Emma said. He'd whisper things when no one else could hear. Threats that sounded like love. The defense attorney objected, but the judge waved it off. Emma focused on the reflection in the courtroom glass, the faint ghostly image of herself sitting across from him. It was like staring into a mirror that showed both who she was and who she used to be. Her voice wavered but didn't break. He made me believe I was the problem, that his lies were my fault. But it wasn't love, it was control. Daniel leaned forward. His lips barely moved, but she could read them. You still need me. Her heart clenched, but she held his gaze until the bailiff stepped closer. When the verdict came, it landed heavy and hollow. Guilty, life imprisonment. The gavel struck once, final as a coffin lid. The courtroom erupted into whispers. Emma didn't move. She watched as Daniel was led away, his face expressionless, except for the faintest curve of a smile. Outside, the world was blinding. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name. Detective Reed guided her through the crowd, murmuring, "It's over now." But inside, she knew it wasn't. Justice had been served, yes, but peace was something else entirely. Daniel's words, his tone, his stare, they had carved themselves into her mind like glass under skin. As she stepped into the sunlight, she caught her reflection in a courthouse window. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw him standing behind her, smiling. And for the first time, she realized the truth. The monster wasn't gone. He lived inside her memory, forever watching. The house was quiet again, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. The year had passed since the trial, and Emma had done everything the therapists and detectives told her to. New locks, new curtains, new address. Still, no matter how many times she moved the furniture or changed the paint color, Daniel's shadow seemed to seep through the walls. She told herself she was healing. She worked from home, baked on Sundays, called her sister more often. There were good days. Days when she almost laughed like she used to. But at night, when the house sank into silence, the memories stirred. She could still hear the echo of his voice, soft and poisonous, curling around the edges of her thoughts. On a rainy Thursday, while reorganizing an old dresser, her hand brushed against something tucked in the back of a drawer. A small black tape recorder. Her breath hitched. She hadn't seen it since the investigation. She thought the police had kept it as evidence. She turned it over, her reflection catching faintly in the metal casing. For a long moment she just stared, heart-pounding thumb hovering over the play button. Then she pressed it. A soft crackle of static filled the air, followed by her own voice. Fragile, shaking. "Daniel, please don't hurt me." The sound hit her like a blow. She remembered that night vividly now. The argument, the rage in his eyes, the way he'd cornered her in the kitchen before she hit record. Then came his voice, calm and chilling. "You make me do this, Emma, you always make me." She froze. That tone, measured, detached, had haunted her dreams for months. Hearing it again made her skin prickle. The recording ended abruptly with the sound of a door slamming. Silence followed. Emma sat on the floor, shaking. For a long time, she couldn't tell whether she was crying from fear or grief. The house around her felt suddenly smaller, colder, as if something unseen had slipped back inside with the sound. She whispered to herself, "He's gone. He's gone." But the words rang hollow. Her eyes drifted to the mirror on the opposite wall. The storm outside flickered through the window, casting faint, ghostly reflections. For a split second, she thought she saw him standing behind her, his outline, faint, smiling. She blinked and it was gone. Only her reflection remained, pale and trembling. Emma placed the recorder back into the drawer but didn't close it all the way. Some part of her couldn't, because deep down she knew it wasn't just a recording. It was a reminder, a pulse, proof that Daniel, his voice, his control, his love still lived somewhere between memory and air. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky, and inside, in the silence that followed, she swore she heard her name whispered back.